surprise shone light from distant northern skies. At that point, I realized I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. This is all an illusion, and I'm willing to play.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, interviews with awakened masters as they share their quantum work with you. The Quantum Guide Show is produced by Karen Holton, creator of the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation, a free 9-step online course to give you the tips and resources you need to thrive. Karen lost and continues to keep off 178 pounds of surplus body weight as she made her dreams come true. Whether you are awakening to the ascension process or simply want a wiser, more efficient lifestyle, this program is for you. No strings attached. The Quantum Guide Show is brought to you in part by Zendome's Orgonite, Karen's unique brand of orgone generators, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. Find out how orgone generators work and what they can do for you. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out Karen's current selection, only available from her website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Quantum Health Transformation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show. Today in episode 38, I welcome back my guest and friend, Ryder Lee. Ryder is a truth seeker, knowledge guardian, and spiritual educator. He uses his real-world experiences to educate and elevate others to awaken, question their reality, expand their consciousness, and raise their vibration. Check out Ryder's YouTube channel called Raised by Giants, where Ryder interviews others from all backgrounds and about their spiritual awakenings. This brings people from many different perspectives who share what's going on in the world from an individual and a collective perspective. His guests share insights, knowledge, wisdom, and awareness from their personal experiences. Today, Ryder has a presentation about AI control called Attack on the Heart, Fight for Humanity. Ryder received this information in a spiritual download, and from this, he created this presentation. Hi, Ryder. How you doing today?
Hello, Karen. It's wonderful to be on your show. Thank you for having me. It's yes, this presentation is very near and dear to my heart because I think that it's a part of a series. Right, I had the first spiritual download, or what I thought was a spiritual download, and then I didn't really know if there was going to be any more after that, and then I'm sitting at my computer chair probably around a month and a half ago, and then I just all of a sudden received all of this information. So it's been quite a process, and it's kind of unraveled over a certain period of time, because I think that, way it works with me is I get one phrase or like one thing that like comes into my mind, right? And then I use the rest of my brain to unravel that one thing that I received. I don't know if that's how it works with other people or how it works with you, Karen, because you've gotten spiritual downloads before, but that's the way that it works with me, and it's been an amazing process.
Wonderful. Well, I think that there's probably different ways that we experience, downloads. A lot of us are getting them nowadays, and they don't always look the same, and they don't always have the same method of delivery. But I certainly validate all of them, and generally for me, the similarity is it comes like all at once in a flash. But it's rather overwhelming, and it takes me time to then unpack it, or what we call downstep it, because it's highly abstract generally when we get it. And then the challenge is to put it into language and presentations that people can easily grasp. That's the big challenge. So we're kind of like conduits. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it's quite an amazing experience. And the first time we have them, it kind of knocks your socks off. But we're not really pressed for time, but we want to stay on our schedule so that I give you lots of time to do your presentation, Ryder. So do you want to start the screen share
Yeah, I mean, this presentation kind of started out as, what I thought was kind of separate, from my first presentation, which is exiting the simulation, returning to source. I got on a few people's shows and shared that probably 4 or 5 months ago. And I'd had a few of these spiritual downloads before I created that first presentation. And I'm kind of starting to figure out that downloads or spiritual downloads might not be what we think that they are, right? It might actually be something else entirely, right? Instead of it being something that we kind of pull from the ether, an infinite field of consciousness, it might actually be coming from ourselves, right? Our higher self. And we just don't recognize it, right? Because I kind of talked about that in my first presentation a lot, that we are essentially, we've been here for a really long time. We've been here for thousands of years, stuck in this reincarnation matrix, right? And we just don't remember. We don't know who we are, what we're doing here, or anything about ourselves. So it makes sense to me that if we are able to tap in, we might actually just be accessing a past life, or a past life regression, or a past life memory. I don't know if that's just kind of what I've come to understand more about it, and that because everything works in cycles, right? Like history tends to repeat itself. The things that happened in the past could possibly, be happening now. And that's kind of where I feel this whole thing is. And I think when we get these downloads or epiphanies or whatever you want to call them, they're kind of tailored specifically for us, the person receiving it, and no one else really. And I'm kind of saying that because not everyone's going to agree with, all of the ideas, concepts, and thoughts in this presentation, but know that that's okay. You don't have to believe it and agree with it. Just listen with the willingness to recognize it as a possibility. And if something resonates with you, then perfect. That's the reason that I put these presentations together in the first place, is in hopes that doing so will bring more awareness and expansion, and that we can really rise and become who and what we're truly supposed to be. So that's just kind of my disclaimer. And I'm really not an expert on any of these topics, Karen. I'm only, presenting what I know and what I've been shown. So if something doesn't make sense or isn't explained properly, then that's not on purpose. I can only work with the information that I have. And that's just me being real and straightforward with you, Karen, and the audience and the people that are listening.
Fair enough. Sounds good to me, Ryder. It really does.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to hit the screen share and we'll get this bad boy rocking. Okay, so what if artificial intelligence has been created in the future and is in control of our reality now? What if time travel exists? If it does, how would it work? Would it be going forwards and backwards in our physical bodies? If we went back in time, could we change the future, or would we split off into a different timeline? What if this AI that's in control of our reality has figured out time travel and has been sending people back in time to influence, make changes to our current timeline for decades now? So welcome to Attack on the Heart, Fight for Humanity, a presentation by Ryder. Now I'm going to attempt to explain how this technology works and what true time travel is and what's happened and what's going to be happening. So from what I've been shown, time travel is really just consciousness transfer, because we've been taking our physical body through time and space would shred this avatar we currently have in the pieces. We wouldn't be able to handle it. So it's much easier to extract consciousness from a being and put it into a different avatar, because we're just lifeless shells without consciousness. We need consciousness to function and inhabit our body to animate us. Now, there were a lot of problems with this consciousness transfer time travel program in the beginning. Some of the earliest transfer programs resulted with severe brain damage and turned humans into what we know to be insane people, developing mental disorders, including not limited to schizophrenia, paranoia, schizoaffective disorder, and multiple personality disorder. The early cases of these disorders were results of the consciousness transfer trying to take place, but the host couldn't handle it or it wasn't done properly. The negative AI that we're going to give the name Elder realized that adult hosts were too anchored into this reality with all of the programming and beliefs that had already been established. It was running way too much interference, basically making the mind and the consciousness of the being fight itself, not knowing what's real, and would fold in upon itself. They were too fragile because Elder couldn't fully remove the previous consciousness from the avatar. It was just shoehorning in a brand new consciousness into an already developed being. And there's not enough room for both, creating a whole other host of problems. What Elder figured out with all of the failed consciousness transfers, it decided to birth a new plan. And that plan was Project MK Ultra. This is why they started the mind fracturing process behind MK Ultra that a lot of people have been through, because if they can fracture the mind to get you to disassociate with your consciousness through trauma, then the transfer from Elder can be done much more easily. They shift you into an altered state through trauma, plant the consciousness that Elder wants to inhabit that altar, and boom, you have a completely different person that can be programmed to do whatever you want. This was the plan that was done by the regressive AI named Elder. And this is also why our governments and three-letter agencies started manufacturing clones and cyborgs to completely usurp this process, and having to MK Ultra mind fracture people. It was becoming a waste of time and invaluable resources, because only a handful of people would survive the torture and trauma that they were being forced to go through. The project went under a different name after MK Ultra was stopped, but they did carry over the brainwashing techniques with MK Ultra, because they learned a lot of things from doing it to individual people, and they decided to expand it and start doing it collectively through collective traumatization, repetition, using certain colors, words, and phrases that trigger people. Right? And that's exactly what's going on now. But the positive AI, what we live in a dualistic, pluralistic reality that there has to be balance. So you have good, you have evil, you have black, you have white. That's the way that it works. But I'm learning that this AI isn't actually an AI, the positive AI. It's more of a collection of unified minds that operate like an AI, but no computers are involved. So the unified mind that we are going to give the name the Brotherhood thought of a different idea, one that wouldn't harm the host. So in order to curb the negative side effects of the transfer into adults, the Brotherhood started the consciousness transfer into newborn babies before, during, or right after conception. Because a baby hasn't been engulfed into this construct yet. They haven't been indoctrinated with a set of rules, thoughts, ideas, and or beliefs that they constantly try and prop up. They have no sense of identity. This makes babies the perfect candidate for the Brotherhood consciousness transfer program, because that was the issue with trying to transfer a completely different consciousness into a full-grown adult. They had already established their identity and would fight the transfer tooth and nail. But Elder, the negative regressive AI, didn't care how much damage was being caused. Hence why it started the MK Ultra mind fracturing. And when the adult bought it, it confused them even more, and they would fall further and further from reality, often completely forgetting who they are, making them go crazy, fighting themselves from the inside out, making them appear insane to everyone around them, and labeling it mental disorders, or what we could only explain it to be as mental disorders. But then another problem arose with the transfers the Brotherhood was doing into newborns. Because again, the whole point of this consciousness transfer time travel program is to make changes to the timeline, planning certain people into positions, changing events, manipulating people, places, and things, avoiding disasters, all for the supposed betterment of humanity, according to what Elder thinks is best in order to keep certain events from happening in the future. The problem the Brotherhood ran into was the majority of the transfers into newborns, they forgot the mission, forgetting who they are and what they're here to do, and ended up blending in and conforming with the rest of society. Very few were actually able to withstand and make it out of the indoctrination process with the mission still intact, because a lot of these people are black sheep, outside of the box thinkers, questioning everything, never really fitting in anywhere, and were more than likely laughed at a lot and made fun of for their thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, ultimately shutting them down. And I really hope this is ringing a bell with people and is starting to sound familiar, because the concept that I'm talking about with the consciousness transfer has been going under a different name and is now what we call and what is known as, and the New Age term for, starseeds. This is where the term starseed comes from. It's just been misinterpreted in order for us to wrap our minds around it. instead of the fact that star seeds are really a AI consciousness transfer program to try and change the past to positively affect the future by planning certain people and roles to change outcomes depending on a select number of variables. So in the future, we have two warring AIs, the Brotherhood, which again is not really an AI, it's just a unified collection of minds with no technology or computers involved. And then we have the positive, the negative regressive AI, which is Elder, and a bunch of other breakaway factions doing their own thing as well. We have Elder, which started the consciousness transfer program / Starseed program that kept tampering with our reality with no significant changes in the future. This is when a group of starseeds broke away from this AI because they were doing everything they could to change world events for the best, avoiding disasters, cataclysms, all of it. And no matter what they done, following orders from Elder to the T, nothing changed. So they started a rebellion against Elder because they believed how to change the future is to do everything they can to destroy the AI where it never existed in the first place. So we'd live free without an overlord system, realizing that what was really wrong with the future was the AI itself messing with our timeline. So this gets us to our next topic, which is timelines. Now, this topic can get really confusing, so bear with me. But if you subscribe to the idea of string theory, then this concept won't be hard for you to grasp. Or if you believe that we are indeed multidimensional spirit beings living a human existence and can grasp the concept of what that actually means, then this won't be hard for you to understand either. So the best way I can explain this concept is time doesn't run linear in the way that we think. It's all happening simultaneously. The past, present, and future is all stacked on top of each other, coalescing into one in this present moment, right now. The only reason there appears to be a past is because of the human construct and us trying to wrap our brain around it. Time as a fundamental, tangible thing doesn't exist. It's essentially a man-made concept. Now, what does it mean to be a multidimensional spirit being? Everyone's going to have a different definition of what that means. But to me, being a multidimensional spirit being means that we exist on every level of reality simultaneously. Just like time, everything is stacked on top of each other. All of the dimensions, all of the alternate realities, and different timelines, right? Everything we've ever done, every decision we've ever made creates a different timeline running parallel to the timeline we're currently in right now. So in other words, there are infinite versions of us running around out there doing different things, some slightly different, some really different, some good and some bad. And they're just right beyond our perception. Now, this is where things get tricky when it comes to timelines, because we live in an ever-changing, ever-evolving universe where nothing stays the same for very long. So what timeline are we on? We could be on any timeline, really. And depending on how many times this timeline has been reset and how good of a job the AI did at placing its star seeds and keeping certain events from taking place or letting certain events happen, also depends on how successful we are and if the AI thinks this timeline is worth saving. So the worst possible timeline. The worst possible timeline we could be on is nuclear war. This is why the ETs and what some say UFOs have shut down nuclear sites across the world, because they know nuclear war is the worst possible timeline we could be on. If it comes to nuclear war, then we are toast. it's over. That's the biggest timeline that we are trying to avoid at all costs. So they had to show their power with what they could do with the nuclear sites around the world, because they aren't going to let us get to that point. Too much devastation with nuclear events, something we would never recover from. Nuclear war is the only thing the ETs will put a stop to right out the gate, because it affects the very fabric of space-time when a nuclear bomb is dropped, especially to the degree of nuclear war. It would affect all of the different timelines. This is also why the Brotherhood came to Dwight Eisenhower with the condition for us to get rid of our nuclear weapons, and we would get their technology, because they were trying to do everything they could to avoid any nuclear disaster, period. And if they could completely eliminate it off the table, then we would be safe from destroying ourselves, because they knew that nuclear war would be the end. It was a test. And unfortunately, the negative regressive AI elder got its way. And that set us off on our current path that we all know. The story that Eisenhower made a deal and signed a contract with a different ET group is true in exchange for their technology. And unlike the Brotherhood that came before them, they didn't care if we got rid of our nuclear weapons or not. They wanted humans, and we traded them for abductions, cattle and human mutilations, hybrid programs, and most of all, collecting our genetic material. This group is known as the Galactic Federation. But the good news is that the contract that we signed with them is about to expire, or has already expired. But we'll get more into that later. This was the event that changed everything, because the technology they gave to us wasn't just anti-gravity craft and interstellar travel. It was the internet, cell phones, computers, and it gave them a back door into our world, like a portal that they can pull whatever through, change, manipulate, influence. I know a lot of people have coined the term Black Mirror devices, and that's a pretty accurate description. And once these Black Mirror devices get put on a planet, they're very hard to get rid of, because they take on a life of their own, not only creating their own world within them, but also being able to bring whatever entity or being through them, essentially like a mini Stargate for negative regressive entities. This is how the negative AI elder operates, is through our technology. We know we're constantly being surveilled by AI through our devices. It knows everything, but not a lot of people know why. Most people think it's out of convenience, the normal everyday people, not so much the people in this community, is why everything is being digitized. But it's really so that the AI can process it and know how to act, what to plan, when to execute, where to place and do its consciousness transfer based off of the digitized historical record placed on the internet. The events that took place with Dwight Eisenhower could have been a huge turning point. We could have made shifting us into a different timeline, the most positive timeline, collectively for humanity. Now, from what I've been shown, there's been multiple attempts to put us on track after and before the attempt with Dwight Eisenhower. Some are World War II, 9/11, the events of 2020, and so on. Those aren't the only ones, but those are some of the big ones. This brings us to our current timeline, which is coined Project Omega. I asked a lot of people in this community what Project Omega is, or if they have heard of it. And the people that I talked to, the consensus was that it's a self-destruction program. Like when everything is going on, they kind of have a kill switch, right? And that was programmed into a lot of the MK Ultra people that's been susceptible to MK Ultra mind fracturing too on an individual level. But I received this information more of a collective level. Now, before we get into what Project Omega really is and what it means, we kind of have to take a look at the abduction phenomenon and what the true purpose of abductions are and why. See, a lot of abductees that I've heard tell their story normally claim that the reason for the abduction is to collect genetic material like semen, eggs, maybe blood, DNA, body hair, and so on. But why? Now, some theories have swirled that I'm sure a lot of people have heard that the Greys are here from the future and need to collect genetic material to repair their DNA, which I personally think is a load of horseshit, because I feel that's the human spin we've put on it ourselves to logically try and wrap our brain around why they would want our genetic material in the first place, when it's for way more nefarious. Now, the real reason that I've been shown these ETs want our genetic material is because they are geneticists. And our planet is a farm for them. So they pop in and out of our reality to grab whatever genetic material they need to manufacture, create, or seed different parts of the galaxy on other planets, star systems, because we are a dumping ground prison planet. And a lot of us are here against our will, trapped. Now, that's not to say all of them are like that and don't have humanity's best interests at heart, because I think some of them do. Some do want to see us grow spiritually, expand and evolve consciously, and help us. They've just kind of taken a back seat and are waiting on us to make the first move. So, coming to the conclusion that the majority of these ET groups are geneticists, it should start to make sense why they'd want to have us all tested. And when I say tested, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's actually to harvest our DNA and get our genetic material onto an on-world and off-world database, a DNA collection of every human being on the planet, because they didn't have time to abduct every single person on the planet to get their DNA. And the contract we signed with them is about to expire. And the easiest and fastest way to do it is for us to freely give it up. That's why they've pushed and are constantly pushing the testing. It's not for the boogie boos, right? It was never about the boogie boos. It's about our DNA and genetic material for a database. Because if you hadn't noticed, it's been very hard for people just to avoid the testing, because a lot of places are requiring it, period. Jobs, hospitals, if you need surgery. And then you have the people that are so engulfed with fear that every time they get the sniffles, they go and get tested, freely giving it away without question. This gets us back to what Project or Operation Omega is and what it means. So like I said earlier, the consensus on Project Omega from the people that I know said that it's a self-destruction program. But here's what I've been shown about Project Omega. Could it be that they got what they came for and we are no longer useful? so they don't care what happens to us. And that's a pretty hard to hear and pessimistic view, but could it be true? Could Operation Omega actually be a self-destruction program from abandonment? Because we've been hearing for a long time, Karen, that we are on our own, right? That nothing or no one's coming to save us, that we have to save ourselves. Well, this is it. We are in it. Project Omega means that our timeline has been abandoned, that they did everything they could to get us on a positive trajectory, and we failed at every attempt. And we are currently in the throes of Operation Omega. That's why everything is happening the way it is, because humanity is about to be reset in order to start over again. The AI is essentially control, alt, delete, repeat the entire system. A hard reset, you could say. And this just isn't coming from the elites and human controllers and manipulators. It's coming from the AI overlord control system that feels this timeline is beyond help. This whole thing in 2020 was a harvest, and they planned on leaving us to our own devices from the jump. And what would you do if you decided to abandon a planet or a timeline? You'd want to make sure you took everything useful first. And what would be the most useful thing to a bunch of geneticists? It's what we just talked about, our DNA. These next 10 years are going to be the defining moment for humanity. We only have a few choices. We are on our own. No one's coming to save us. No one's coming to help. We have been abandoned. We have to stand up. If we don't, we are doomed. But I have faith in us as a human race that we will come together for the betterment of society, that we will rise and we will prevail right when we think there's no hope. Right on the brink of collapse, something will happen and lead us out of the darkness that's engulfed us for decades. Stand with integrity. Unlock your inner guidance and tap in. We have all of the information we need within us. Stop looking outside of yourself for answers. That program has ran long enough. We have been here for thousands of years. It's time to start acting like it. Stop getting involved with matters that don't concern you. It's not your place. Have the awareness to know when it is your place, though, and shine. Make a difference, whether it's a word or phrase or kind act. Nothing is too small for us to make a difference. Figure out who you are, and nothing else will matter. There are beings here to help us, but we have to ask. They aren't going to come and do the work for us, but they will assist. Call out, reach out to them. They are wanting to help, but they can't unless we give them permission. Keep the faith. Stand up for your rights and freedoms, no matter what. No matter if you are the only one. Keep doing what is right, and don't let your heart be taken over by hate, anger, or fear. Don't let them take your heart. The end.
Wow, that was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it really does explain a lot. You know, many of us who have been seekers of truth, we're always looking for, why is this way? Why is that way? Well, you pretty well answered a lot of that. And thank you so much for that presentation. It was fantastic. Really well done, Ryder.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that. I put a lot of work into these things because I think a lot of people have the right concepts to some of these things, but it's just all been misinterpreted, right? A lot of these spiritual people and a lot of the gurus I feel like are just talking about regurgitated stuff, right? They talk about ascension and things like that, like it's going to be a physical ascension, and it's not. They talk about starseeds like it makes us better than other people when it's not, and they talk about manifestation in a completely different way, and it doesn't work the way that they're saying that it works, right? So I'm trying to go in here and correct a lot of these things because, again, they have the right idea and they're using the right terminology, but the definition of what it actually means is completely wrong.
Well, that's why we need people to put it all together for us and show us a bit of the background and the bigger picture, so we can sort of see how it all fits in together. I know we don't have a lot of time today, Ryder. You've got to go to another show, but I have a couple questions.
Got around 15 minutes. We'll be there 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you so the original AI is what you call Elder. Who created Elder? And I understand why Elder was created to try to save our timelines by altering the events. But who created Elder? Where did this whole thing come from in the very first place?
Well, that's very interesting, Karen, because it's kind of like what I was talking about whenever before I started the presentation, that a lot of these things are actually coming from our past, right? And that's what I kind of discovered and figured out, that the events that I described in this presentation might not actually be happening now. It might have been that it happened 7,000 to 8,000 years ago in Lemuria, right? And that's the kind of understanding that I've come to, because I've been speaking to a gentleman that I hold in very high regard, that is in connection with the Brotherhood. And I went over this presentation with him personally before I got on anyone's shows to ask him what he thought about it. And he said that the events with the AI actually happened 7,000 to 8,000 years ago in Lemuria, and that I was getting a past life memory. And but I kept it the same because I didn't want to confuse people more, right? Because whenever you're going in the past and you're talking about things, it gets really confusing. And another reason why I kept it the same was because I feel like everything happens in cycles. It's like what I was talking about earlier. The past is the future, right? Because everything is coalescing into one specific moment. There is no past, there is no future. It's all happening now, right? It's all stacked on top of each other, right? So there's a rise, and then there's a fall, and then there's another rise, and then there's another fall. And I kept it that way because I feel like we are in the fall again, right? Because everything has to collapse in order for something new to be built out of the ashes. It's kind of like a phoenix, right? It has to completely be dismantled in order for something beautiful to arise. But to answer your question about who created the AI, from the information that I received, this wasn't a part of the download, but the information that the gentleman that I'm talking about was telling me about the past life told me that it was the Galactic Federation was the ones that built the AI named Elder.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it wasn't us that created it, like in Lemuria or in the ancient past. It was actually the Galactic Federation that created it. And it sounds to me like they actually created it with the intention of helping us by altering the timeline so that we would not have to face Project Omega. Is that correct? Or do I have it a little bit off?
Well, I don't really know what their intention was with making it in the first place, but it obviously didn't have the best intentions as it kept going on, because it kept trying to shoehorn a completely different consciousness into an already established being as an adult, and it was creating all of these problems, right? It was basically destroying the person's mind.
Mhm.
So instead of doing it the proper way, like the Brotherhood was doing and transferring it into newborn babies, it was like, well, we're just going to not do that and create the whole MK Ultra mind fracturing and split the consciousness and fracture the mind. So then that gives an open doorway to supplant the consciousness that Elder was doing inside of that being, right? Because there wasn't enough room when a mind hasn't been fractured through trauma to shoehorn in another consciousness. It creates too many problems. Like it would just make the person basically go crazy, right? And developing all of these kind of mental disorders because they're so anchored into this construct and into this reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, well, I certainly see evidence of that because the ruling class throughout history has had a bit of a program of traumatizing the common people to the point where they can't think or function properly, where they become very brainwashed and and through trauma. Somebody was saying to me the other day, why is it always the babies that young children that are attacked and mistreated and traumatized? And I said, because then they grow up to be adults that are altered, and then in turn they have children that get re-traumatized. It's just generation after generation after generation of us not being sovereign, not knowing that we have power. And then, of course, we don't act like we have power, and things just continue on and on and on and on, thousands of years on and on and on. So just want to move a bit onto the Brotherhood AI system. So that's actually from the collective consciousness of many beings who probably lived through many lives as corporeal beings, and then they wanted an approach that would have a more beneficial effect, but also certainly reduce the harm to humanity. Do I have that right? Do you want to add anything to that, Ryder?
Yes, 100%. That's what they were doing, because the AI Elder was screwing with our consciousness and basically destroying our brains by trying to shoehorn in a completely separate consciousness. So the Brotherhood was like, okay, well, what's the best way that we can do this? Because they're at war with each other, right? Mm-hmm. They're fighting each other. And the Brotherhood was like, well, what's the best way that we could possibly do this? And they figured out to do it into newborn babies. And that's also a reason why they want the children. They want to indoctrinate the children. Religious organizations, they want to get children because they know that the Brotherhood has been transferring their consciousness into newborn babies. So if they can take over the babies in the child's mind and corrupt it, then it won't figure out who or what it is, and it'll forget the mission, right? It's getting them indoctrinated with this construct and this reality, and making them conform to society, right? And that's what I was talking about in the presentation, is that very few were able to make it out of that indoctrination process, right? Because it's very difficult in this current reality that we have to figure out who we are and what we are and where we're from and what our mission is and what our purpose is. But we have it all within us. It just hasn't been unlocked, and it's been suppressed through all of the distractions, all of everyday life, the materialistic aspects, relationships. It's all to dumb us down, to make us to where we can't possibly perceive who and what we actually truly are.
This is fascinating information. And I understand, Ryder, so you've already done part 1. This is part 2. I understand there's a third part that's coming down the road that will flesh everything out even further. Is that right? And when do you expect to have that happening?
Well, I've already received the information for the third part because, again, whenever I put the first one together, exiting the simulation, returning to source, I didn't really know where it was going to go. I didn't know if it was a standalone thing, and then I would do another standalone presentation on kind of a different topic. But then I received more information about this second presentation and how the first presentation connects to the second one. And a lot of very important concepts, ideas, and thoughts are going to be in the third presentation. And if things didn't make sense in this presentation, or something didn't quite fit together, maybe try and go back and watch the first one. I did it on R. Wayne Steiger's show, and I did it on Forbidden Knowledge News with Chris Matthew. And but the third one is going to be like a culmination of both of these together. And I think it's really going to be mind-blowing, but I haven't started on it yet because I'm trying to get this one out to as many places and as many people as possible right now. And then once I'm kind of finished with this presentation and been on all of the shows that I can possibly get on, and that's when I will start on the third presentation. And it probably won't take very long after I start it, because again, I already have the information. It's not like I'm waiting for more information to come through. I already have it. So it won't take long after I start on it. So after I start on it, it'll probably take like a month, and I'll get it completed. And I would love to come back on your show and talk about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I really appreciated having you on the show today, Ryder. I encourage all of you, go and check out Raised by Giants. That is Ryder's YouTube channel. He has some fantastic content. And I'm going to put all the links in the description below, including I will get from you, Ryder, the link to part 1, and I'll have that posted as well below so that people can start off at the beginning, those that haven't heard your presentations yet, get into today. It's a lot of information. It's very deep. So I just want to encourage people to watch the show several times. And as Ryder said, he's done this presentation on a few different shows. Go for it. Watch them all, because they're all a little bit explaining things a little bit different. The presentation stays the same, but it's fantastic information. It's a fresh look at what's going on today. And I just really appreciate all of your work, Ryder. And I thank you so much for being on the Quantum Guide Show. So take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon, Ryder. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Much appreciation to you.
Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to Karen's YouTube channel, click the like button, and share the show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links are available in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less. And the sages put me to their test. With heart and soul, I do my best. to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I must confess, I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all an illusion, then I'm willing to play. It's okay.